Our topic maths this week is about graphing and particularly creating line graphs. And the video that I'm going to do for you just now is quite challenging. It includes some things that are quite challenging. I think some of you are needing that just now, so if you're finding it too much, don't panic, just do it all without the decimals. That's fine, that's okay if that's where you're at, but I wanted to provide something that was a bit of a push. So, it's about collecting data, and I know when we're all in this lockdown, one of the difficult things to do is find that data. So what I suggest is sort of timing things or collecting data about your family. The data that I'm going to use is I have started running since the beginning of lockdown. I'm not particularly great at it, but I have been quite obsessively recording how far I've been going each day in order to help me see myself progressing at something, because that's one of the things that's really good for my mental health, is to know that whatever else is going on in the world, I'm doing something, I'm getting better at something. So I've been sort of collecting data about my running, and I'm going to use that today. Now, I have said before, it's only appropriate to do a line graph if you've got numbers along the sides and numbers along the bottom. There is an exception to that rule, and it's quite an important exception. The exception is if along the bottom you have something to do with time, like months or days of the week or times of day, that's absolutely fine. And the reason for that is those things can be put in order. Like if you've got days of the week, you can put them in order: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you started on a Tuesday, you can move it along. As long as you have them in order, that's okay. It's not like if you did categories, types of pet, and it was dog, cat, fish, you can't put those in any sort of order that makes mathematical sense. Does that make sense? Let's start with getting some of this data down. On the 22nd of March, I ran 1.7 kilometres. On all of my data is on a computer down here. On the 24th, I ran 3.2 kilometres. So, I've got my dates down here and the numbers down here. I'll take a picture of this and put it up so you can use my data if you want to. But on the 22nd, I ran 1.7 kilometres. On the 24th, I ran 3.2 kilometres. On the 26th, I ran 2.8. On the 28th, 3.7 kilometres. On the 30th, 3.8 kilometres. And on the 1st, 3 kilometres exactly. The next thing that I would need to do is think about how to turn these into a graph. So that's what we're coming on to. Now, the first thing a graph needs is a title. Take a moment. What would you call this graph? Remember, the title should include what both categories are. So I think I'm going to call it How Far Does Miss Lister Run on Different Days? Because that includes how far I run and the different days. And it's a question, which is always nice to call a graph a question. There. And then the next thing I would think about is axes. Now, you would always put the one that goes up in even amounts along the bottom. So you would always put the time of a date along the bottom in this case. Go there, so I've got some room to write underneath it. Again, I've got no ruler, I'm not going to worry about that. And actually what I'm going to do, rather than writing out the whole dates, is call this one run number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. And so I'll write those numbers along the bottom. I could write the dates, but it's too small, it's going to be cramped, so I'm just going to write those numbers. Remembering, I start at 0, and I need to make sure these are evenly spaced out. So I'm going to put them on each line. And to make it nice and clear, I'm going to write the word run number down here, because we always need a label for that axis. For my up and down axis, my y-axis, I'm going to record the distance of the run in kilometres. And to do this, the first thing I need to do is find my longest distance, find the biggest number. And for me, that's 3.8 kilometres. So my biggest number is 3.8 kilometres. So that's how far my scale needs to go up. Now, it's really important that I use decimals in my scale as well as just using whole numbers, because most of these are decimal numbers, and it's really important. And I'm telling you, my lungs feel the difference between 3.0 and 3.8, so I want to make sure I record those decimals as well. I'm not going to think about rounding, I'm going to think about recording accurately. The way I'm going to do that is, on my scale, put quite a big distance between the whole numbers. So I need to go up to 3.8, so maybe I'll go 0.51, 1.52, 2.53, 3.54. That actually doesn't take me all the way to the top, so maybe I'll go a little bit more spaced out, see if I can go 1.51, sorry, 0.51, 1.52. No, that's going to be too smushed. So, and I think I probably do want to have the 0.5 on the line, because otherwise it'll be difficult to work out. So we'll end up going a little bit smushed, but that's better than having a scale that doesn't really make it easy to find the numbers. Okay? And I'm going to call my scale distance run in kilometres, because when we do units on a graph, you can put that unit in the axis label and then you don't have to write it on every single one of those. So, before I start plotting my data, I check my graph. Is it ready to go? And there's really sort of 5 things I'm looking for. Title, check. 0 in the corner, so both scales start at 0, check. The scales are evenly spaced out. I don't go 0, big gap 1, tiny gap 2, big gap 3. Evenly spaced, and the same up the side. It goes up in even amounts each time, so it goes up by 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 each time. I've got a label here, I've got a label here, I've included my units. I'm ready to go. So, run number 1. I went 1.7. So I start at 1 and I follow it up. 1 is bigger than 1, 1.5 is bigger than 1.5. It's not as big as 2, it's in between 1.5 and 2. It's not quite halfway in between, it's a little bit closer to the 5. If you imagine you could go 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, your divisions will be like that. So that's 1.6, 1.7, so I put my cross there. Run number 2. I went 3.2 kilometres. So run number 2, sorry, follow up to number 3, and think about how it would be. Would it be 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and then on the line is 3.5, and this is 3.2. So I put my cross there. Run number 3, I went 2.8. This one, I'm going to have a go without the little lines, just judging, because that might be something you find more helpful. So 3, follow it up to 2.5, it's more than 2.5, it's not as much as 3, it's closer to the 3. It's going to be about there. It's not as close as 0.9 would be, so it's sort of closer, but not really close. And I do the same with the others. Run number 4, 3.7. So follow up from number 4, it's bigger than 3.5, would have 3.7, 3.7, 3.8, 3.94. So it goes there. Run number 5, 3.8 kilometres. So my big one up to there. And you can see it's a little bit higher than that one that I said was 3.7. And last but not least, run number 6, I went exactly 3 kilometres. So that is just going to be on that line there. Got my points plotted. Had to take a little bit of time being careful of getting that decimal scale right. So, this is a line graph. So now that I've got all of my points plotted, I join them up with a line. Important note, I don't start at 0. I didn't have a run 0 where I ran 0 kilometres. Run 0 didn't exist. I started with 1, so my line starts with 1. And that's okay, it doesn't matter that it's floating in the middle of the graph, it doesn't need to start at 0. For this, it makes sense to start at 1. Think about the real life situation that your graph represents and whether it makes sense to start at 0 or 1. Up to you. And then I connect them up, making sure that I don't miss any. If you have a ruler, this is a great time to use your ruler. If you happened to leave school without a ruler, it's not the end of the world. Just try as hard as you can to get those lines nice and straight. So, joining those up with a nice line. And that's it. That's your graph finished. But it's really important to ask yourself, do you understand the graph? Does it make sense to you? So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to check that. Look at my graph. Overall, would you say I'm getting better at running? Which days have been my best days? Are any days on there surprising? Do any days break the pattern of how it's been going? How far might you expect that I would go on run number 7? Some things to think about. So, off you go and do your graphs. I would love to see what you do. If you're feeling like challenging yourself, use some data with decimals in it. You're very welcome to use my data, to use data that you found yourself, or to make some up. I'm not going to come round to your house and check. Up to you. Work hard and I'll see you soon.